Cyril, could you please bring us up to speed on what is happening in the Kyiv Pechersk Lavra? Who has left the Lavra? Who is still staying in the Lavra? And do they have any place to leave from the Lavra?
Right. Well, there are many tracks of what is happening in the Lavra. There are three major entities on the territory of the monastery. One is the monastery per se, with, well, before the events, there were over 200 monks who constituted this entity, the monastic community of the Lavra. Then over 200 students of the Kyiv Theological Seminary and Academy, which is the main theological institution, educational institution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And that entity included the apparatus, so the administrative apparatus, the students per se, and the library. So yes, all of them had to be managed somehow. Then the third entity is the administrative apparatus of the church, of the Ukrainian church, which is also hosted on the territory of the Lavra. As far as I know, most parts of all three units have left. It seems that the first one, among the first who have left, was the primate of the church, Metropolitan Onufry. He left, well, unlike, in the case of good captains who leave their vessels last, he left among the first, the Lavra, which is, well, I can't explain why this is happening like this. Regarding the monks, some of them have left the monastery already. Some of them have stayed. Some of them decided to stay whatever it takes. As you know, formally speaking, there are two communities now on the Lavra's territory. One is the community that existed of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and then a newly established community. However, it consists so far of one monk, as far as I know. Possibly some other monks can switch to the community, but this is not sure. We need to wait. And I think no one knows whether and how many will switch to this community, which belongs to the Ukraine Orthodox Church of Ukraine, the Orthodox Church. Mm-hmm. At least one person is there. So everything is vague. Everything is like moving parts. It's unclear what will happen as a result of the procedures that were initiated by the Ukrainian state. There seems to be a lot of turmoil, a lot of unsettling, and a lot of course, a lot of unrest, both within Lavra and probably even more so outside Lavra, because many people who identify themselves as the members of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and who live in different areas of Ukraine, they have been agitated. They have been really stirred and disturbed by the events, and they they have commissioned themselves, or they, to help somehow, either actively or passively, either being present physically in Kyiv or from distance. So it's really, it's almost like an ideal storm, I would say, and it's evolving, and we don't know what will be the result of it.
Well, formally, the decision justified its the government justified its decision to terminate the lease by violations that were Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate had committed while living in these premises by building some new buildings that were not consistent with the historical style, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems to me that these formal justifications, they're simply a pretext, and the problem
Exactly.
is something else. So how do you view this decision to terminate the lease? What are the actual reasons that the Ukrainian state is asking the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate to leave? What's the real problem?
Yeah, I can absolutely agree with you that the violation of the status of the Lavra as a monument, as a UNESCO site, by the communities that state on its territory, it's rather a pretext. It's not a reason, it's a pretext. And the reasons like elsewhere, the main reason is apparently the inability of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the leadership of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, primarily to tackle the issue that has been indicated repeatedly by the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian society, the issue of the active or passive collaboration of the church with the intruder, with the Russian aggressor in different ways. And indeed, we saw the pictures and footages when the bishops of the church participated in the annexation ceremonies in the Kremlin, when they participated in different events organized by the Kremlin to demonstrate that the occupation is legal, and they added to legalizing this occupation. And of course, the leadership of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church was completely unable to address this issue. Well, the way they addressed it was really, I think, intimidating, not for those who trespassed, but to the Ukrainian society. Even though it had to be the other way around. This inability certainly triggered, I think, the reaction of the Ukrainian state, which before that preserved some kind of neutrality to the religious issues. And of course, I think these steps, or a more active, proactive policy of the Ukrainian state to the Ukrainian church was overdue. It is something needed. However, I think the strategy and the tactics that were chosen were not optimal, to say the least. I think the Ukrainian state chose a shortcut to solve this problem by eliminating the entire structure, or by getting rid of the entire structure instead of tackling a particular individual cases. I think in a legal state, the state of law, with the prevalence of law, individual perpetrators should be prosecuted and punished, not structures, not groups. And I think in this case, the state decided to to solve the problem of the Ukrainian church, so to say, once and forever by a simple movement, just by evicting, all the structures of the church from the Lavra. I believe, well, that was the easiest way. It seemed to be the easiest way. As I said, a shortcut to solving the problem, but it appears to be probably the most difficult in terms of outcomes, in terms of the results. For the common good of the Ukrainian society and for the standing of Ukraine in the international arena. I think the criticism is growing, probably for the first time, I would say, on the international level, and it comes not just from religious leaders like Pope Francis. People are now not necessarily taking the Pope's kind of critique for its face value, but it comes also from international, sometimes secular bodies and institutions. And I think it is a warning signal for the Ukrainian state, for the Ukrainian society. We need to preserve the unanimous support from the international community, and I think we cannot afford. It's too pricey for us to afford to challenge this support by unwise steps and choosing shortcuts instead of long but lawful way.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to be the devil's advocate here and address the topic of collaboration. So basically, We have the Ukrainian Orthodox Church that in occupied territories occupied by Russia, basically started collaborating and going along with the new Russian puppet leaders that are imposed in those regions. Is this any different than what the church historically did in other conditions of occupation, such as under Nazi Germany? I mean, the church basically put up with all of these new occupiers, and it did not put up a fight. It did not lead any rebellions against them. And the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate and the occupied regions is basically doing this, what the church is used to doing under occupation. Do I understand?
You're right. You're right. Yeah, you do. You do. And it has to do with the long tradition, centuries-long tradition of the Eastern Christianity of collaborating with the state, the famous or infamous symphony between the church and the state that goes back to the 4th century, the era of Constantine the Great, when the church was legalized by the state and was embraced by the state and eventually became one single part. Mechanism with the state. It continues even after the state disestablished the churches. It is the case in Ukraine, where the church is separated from the state according to the constitution, which signifies the formal status of this disestablishmentness of the church in Ukraine. Still, the mentality within the church is the same. We cooperate with whoever is in charge, with the present ruler, and I'm sure that this was one of the driving forces for those collaborants of the occupied territories, in addition to a sincere sympathy with the Russian cause, with the cause of the war, which is also, I think, is a feature for many, both on the occupied and on unoccupied free territories of Ukraine. Of course, as I said, there are such cases, and we know, well, we don't know all the cases. We know some of them, and they're appalling already. There are more cases that we just don't know, and they happen. And this is really this tempts, I think, the Ukrainian society and the Ukrainian state to solve the problem of the collaboration within the Ukrainian church just by, annihilating the structure. I don't think that this will solve the problem, because this will not annihilate the people, the real actual collaborants. Imagine that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is abolished, which is legally impossible because the Ukrainian Orthodox Church doesn't have a legal personality, as we know. The people will stay. Well, they will be unable, maybe hypothetically speaking, in going to this church, but they will do their work of correcting the Russian artillery, giving up sensitive information to the occupants and so forth. So the abolition of the church will not solve the problem of collaboration. Moreover, it will create additional problems for the standing of Ukraine on the international scene, as I said. What will solve the problem of collaboration is to try individually every single suspect on the basis of evidence, on the firm basis of legal proceedings according to the Ukrainian law, by the Ukrainian court in the name of Ukrainian people. And those trials need to be fair, need to be objective, and need to be carried out with transparency and publicity, proper publicity. Then, when justice is served to the perpetrators who have been proven to be perpetrators, then I think that will be the solution of the problem of collaborants, not abolishing a structure. This is the reverse side of the same mistake that happened in the previous periods of the Ukrainian history. Like, for example, after 2014, when the Ukrainian Orthodox Church was complicit in collaborating with Yanukovych's regime, and the same notorious Metropolitan Pavlo, who is like really, he comes up with really appalling statements and so forth. He did the same after 2014 and before 2014 by comparing Yanukovych with the pious Joseph, who carry the body of Christ and so forth with the disciples of Christ, and that was really outrageous what he said. And yet everyone was forgiven after 2014 because exactly they belong to a structure. So the state treated everyone, including Metropolitan Pavlo, including those who openly collaborated with the regime of Yanukovych, supported the shootings in the Maidan, for example. They were forgiven because they belonged to the structure. So the structure somehow protected them, individual cases. Nowadays, the structure draws down everyone who belongs to it. Just by the fact that someone belongs to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is called Moscow Patriarchate, and believe it is so, but legally it is just the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Just by the fact of belonging to the church, everyone is suspected of collaborating, and that's why in bulk they are called the FSB members, agents in the Cossacks. This is the reverse side of treating people by their belonging to a structure, and this is wrong. I believe this cannot happen in a democratic state. People can be treated just for what they've done, not for where they belong to.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate is talking about persecution from the side of the state. Do you agree with this assessment?
Of course not. Well, probably they don't know, or they pretend they don't know what the real persecutions were, even in the Soviet time, when just because people believed in God, they were persecuted. No one persecutes people because they believe in God, or they are Orthodox, or whatever. What the state, I believe, tries to do, not always successfully, one should admit, but they try, is to put everyone equal, to be equal in front of the Ukrainian law. This may feel like persecution because before that, many people in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church felt that they are above the law, and they had this feeling of being irreproachable, for what they do. Metropolitan Pavlo acts in the same modality of being irreproachable, and now the state tries to put him together with others in front of the law. Of course, the Ukrainian legal system is not perfect and continues to follow, this. I think this principle articulated properly by the Brazilian President Vargas, but probably it was even before him, that the law is served to my enemies, and my friends are exempted from that. And it may look like the law is deliberately served now, justice served now only to one Ukrainian church, not to everyone. This impression should be corrected, I think, by the objective attitude of the state to everyone. I think the basic principles of treating the Ukrainian Orthodox community should be legal. The first one is the principle of presumption of innocence. People should not prove that they are innocent, as some have to do. I think this is wrong, to make people, to make people prove that they're innocent. They are innocent by definition. They need to be proven that they are to be blamed for anything by court, by legal procedures. And the second one is whatever religion they belong to, whatever identity they have in the terms of the church, whether they identify themselves as the believers of the Autocephalous Church or the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate, they primarily are Ukrainian citizens. They are the same people who fight against the aggressor. If Ukraine falls, they will fall with Ukraine. If Ukraine survives, they will survive with Ukraine. And they are connected, they are citizens, and they should be treated as the Ukrainian citizens, regardless of what they believe and what they belong to. I think those two principles need to be observed in the first place before any policy is developed regarding the Ukrainian churches.
Well, we can say that basically the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate was tolerated by the state until quite recently. Just this fall, a series of raids were carried out on monasteries of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And basically, we have seen like a shift in policy of the state towards dealing with the church. Can we talk a little bit about why it's a problem in the first place and why this turn happened?
Well, that's exactly why it sounds like a problem. That it seems that the activities of the state regarding communities, they are conditioned by the fact that those communities which are searched belong to a particular ecclesial structure, not because what they do, not because they are suspected to do, individually, but because they belong to the structure. So the entire structure is victimized and stigmatized. And this is the problem, I believe. When the perpetrators are treated not by their deeds, but what they belong to or what they say they belong to, and I think this is problem. This is a problem. This is exactly a feature of the states that are undemocratic, to say the least.
But is the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate a problem in the first place? Right now, in Ukrainian society, there is great animosity towards this church because it is essentially part of the church of the aggressor state that blesses the war against Ukraine, and it's hard for Ukrainians to understand how this is possible in a country that is a year at war. So let's talk a little bit about this council that was held in 2022, May 2022. Oh no. Okay.
Excuse me. Can you just? Yeah, it's something dropping water. So I need to. Yeah.
So in May 2022.
Maybe could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. In May 2022, Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate held a council where they condemned the war against Ukraine and proclaimed their independence from Russian Orthodox Church. At the same time, a commission found that Ukrainian Orthodox Church is still a part of the Russian Orthodox Church. So can you talk about what the canonical status of Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate is, and why it's not in a hurry to break ties, and how we should view this at all?
Right. Yes, I believe that there was a sincere try by the leadership of the Ukrainian Church to distance itself from Moscow. It was not just a pretension, to distance themselves. They really meant it. They really wanted it, I believe. However, they were incomplete. They were not consistent in what they tried. They made, I would say, 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So they eliminated all the references to the Moscow Patriarchate statutes in their bylaws. At the same time, they introduced new references. They effectively eliminated all the explicit references and introduced some implicit references to their bylaws. And in this way, they effectively created a situation when they can claim for the Ukrainian society that they are not anymore part of the Moscow Patriarchate. And in some cases, when it fits them, they could claim that, well, they are still somehow a part of it. That's why Moscow did not reproach, did not retaliate the Ukrainian Church for what they did. From the Moscow perspective, it is still a part of the Moscow Patriarchate. Moreover, from the perspective of the majority of the Orthodox churches, including the Ecumenical Patriarchate, they are still a part, just dioceses of the Moscow Patriarchate in Ukraine. That's also true. So the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is effectively a structure which entertains a very wide array of interpretations of what it is, from being autocephalous, independent, to being just dioceses or parishes of the Moscow Patriarchate in Ukraine. So this broadness of interpretations they hoped would help them to survive, to navigate, through the contempt that they indeed have in the Ukrainian society and from the Ukrainian state. But it didn't work, it seems. It helped them to continue somehow until recently. But now, especially, I think that what triggered the state's resolve to deal with the Ukrainian church was exactly the participation of the active participation of its hierarchs in the procedures of annexation of the Ukrainian territories by the Kremlin. That really was the trigger, personal trigger for Zelensky, I believe. I think he received some promises from Metropolitan Onufri that the latter would deal somehow with this situation, but Onufri did not deliver on his promises, and this became really the real reason why this reproach from the Ukrainian state happened, and this happened already after May 2022. So the expertise which was made by following the decision of the Ukrainian government that established that this church really has ties, still has ties with the Moscow Patriarchate, I believe the conclusion of the expertise is correct. It is a basis now, effectively, for new actions, for new policies by the Ukrainian state regarding this church.
Why can't the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate just break ties with Russia? Why can't it just do the jump?
That's a good question. You see, this church has developed a deep dependence on one personality. Its primate, Metropolitan Onufri. He's a very charismatic figure. He is an unpredictable figure, even for himself. If you ask him what he would do himself, in a week or so, he would not say what exactly.
Could you just 5 seconds back repeat what you said was a problem with the connection?
Yeah. I mean, it is recording anyway, so it's going to be on the cloud. So what I wanted to say is that this church has developed a profound dependence on one single person, its primate. Metropolitan Onufri has become not just a primate of the church, but its very identity for many. For many, he is almost like Jesus Christ, the head of this church. And by betraying the church, they mean betraying Metropolitan Onufri and vice versa. And Metropolitan Onufri himself, he's really a special charismatic figure. He's a charismatic figure. Some people believe he is holy. Certainly he is charismatic, at least, and he is, as a charismatic figure, unpredictable, even for himself. So it depends, I think, completely on him. Take, for example, the course of Metropolitan Pavlo, the abbot of the Lavra, who is effectively his placeholder for Onufri. He's like executor, like he's a CEO of the monastery, so to say, while the president is Metropolitan Onufri, who is considered to be the ultimate ultimate abbot of the Lavra, and Pavlo is just his representative to the Lavra. And it's completely up to Onufri to keep Pavlo or to fire him. And he has chosen to keep Pavlo. That is his decision. Why he has decided this? It's his business. And I think this complete dependence of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church on one single charismatic, unpredictable personality is one of the main reasons of the crisis where the church found itself in. This complete unaccountability of Onufri to the rest of the church. When he does whatever he wants and everyone follows. And he decided to, like in May, to have this council, so to say, no one knows what it was exactly, to get rid of the reference to the Moscow Patriarchate. And now his unwillingness to do anything else, I think they have led to the situation of complete disaster for this church. Mm-hmm. It's because, I think it's primarily because of him, in my judgment.
Mm-hmm. I see. So But what would have been like an ideal scenario of behavior of these priests that stayed in the occupied territories? How would they have to have behaved for it to be acceptable to Ukrainian society? Maybe have some examples.
They behave in different ways already. Some of them collaborate, some of them, clap their palms. They sing hallelujah, to the invaders, and receive them with, as saviors. Some of them are neutral. They try to stay away of, politics, as they say, and to keep to their business. And some of them resist the way they can. There are also even bishops who resist. For example, as far as I know, Metropolitan Panteleimon of Luhansk, who participated in the Moscow ceremony of annexation, and he is a collaborant, right? He has been sanctioned by the Ukrainian state. However, he resists at least, until, well, as far as we know, resisted any attempt to include himself to the hierarchy of the Russian Orthodox Church. He tried to, to keep in connection canonical relationship with Metropolitan Onufry. So, in a sense, one can call it some form of resistance, not particularly maybe helpful for Ukraine as the state, but at least it's not a complete collaboration, I would say. I think different degrees of resistance can be observed and will be observed when more details will be revealed in the future among other clergy of the Ukrainian Church. I know that there are cases when the priests of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church on the occupied territories, they were forced by the occupants to join the Moscow Patriarchate per se, and they refused to. And they were threatened, with the dilemma: either you join us or you get, you go to prison, you go to a dungeon. And they still, preserve the affiliation with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, even though it is the Church of the Moscow Patriarchate. So it's very complicated on the turf, on the ground, and we cannot say that everyone who is on the occupied territory is a collaborator. It would be unfair and probably very unjust to some of them.
What about this ideology of the Russian world, the infamous heresy of Patriarch Kirill, and
Kirill.
and the Russian
He
Orthodox
prefers-
Church? How widespread is it with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate? Do they believe in the Russian world?
They certainly believed. I remember, for example, a public sermon by Metropolitan Antony Pakanich, who is the chancellor of the church, in the Trapezhная church in the Lavra, soon after 2014, when he came, to the Ambo to preach, and he tried to be apologetical about the ideology of the Russian world publicly. I think it has been recorded, so it can be just pulled up, I don't believe that people nowadays, well, certainly I can't say that any sane bishop or priest of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, in free Ukraine, would utter publicly this ideology. I know that publicly many detest it, many have rebuked it, many really hate it because they believe it is the reason of their troubles, and they believe that it is the reason of the war per se, and they suffer from the war. They really, as a part of the Ukrainian society, they just bear all the burdens of the Ukrainian society, and they understand that the Russian world ideology is the reason of that, and they hate it. I think there are still pockets within the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, including the monasteries, primarily the monasteries, where this ideology is hiddenly upheld, and confessed in different ways. But those are pockets. It's not really a mainstream within the church. While it is a mainstream in the Russian church, that's for sure. The majority would support it. Of course, there is a debate whether the Russian world is like a consistent ideology. It's like a whole thing, similar to like Nazi or fascist ideology. It's a debatable question. Certainly, it features some very important elements of the classical ideologies, at least in the capacity, ability to drive people, to the common cause, like supporting this war. Therefore, well, my summary would be in answering your question would be that the Russian world ideology, whatever it is, and however it is articulated, is the mainstream in the Russian church. That's for sure in Russia, but it's certainly a very marginal phenomenon in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate nowadays, at least on the free territories.
Right. Well, I mean, these pockets in the monasteries, that would basically substantiate this SBU raid on the monasteries that was carried out. So
that's for sure. That's for sure. That's for sure. I think there were some good reasons to make those raids.
yeah.
However,
so maybe it wasn't that discriminatory, huh? Maybe they did have reasons to go to those specific monasteries. What do you think?
Well, first of all, legally speaking, the SBU had all rights to do that. It's legal, I think, to do it as a preventive measure, and I think it's not against the Ukrainian law. It may sound discriminatory, in the sense that whether it was really important in some cases to do that. And essentially what the SBU showed afterwards is their finding, even though I think according to the procedures, they're not supposed to do that. But I think they wanted to give some kind of report to the society. What happened? They showed some books and booklets and so forth, which is not illegal per se to have those books. And I believe to have those books is not necessarily an indication that people who have those books comply with them. Like those books can be kept for research reasons. And it's not illegal to have them, right? So the evidence I believe, was not sufficient in the cases when some places like monasteries were accused of collaborating, with the enemy, when just some books were shown. What is more serious is, of course, the passports, what kind of citizenships the church hierarchs and priests had. And there were cases when some of them had Russian citizenship together with Ukraine, which is illegal according to the Ukrainian law. And I think it is the right of the president to decide what to do with such cases. So therefore, I believe, but I'm not a lawyer. I should make this kind of disclaimer. So it's not my position to judge, but I believe that it is legal that the president can decide about the citizenship of the some church hierarchs figures who were deprived of Ukrainian citizenship on the pretext of holding double citizenship. Anyway, so it doesn't seem like illegal what they did, but it sounded like discriminatory in some cases. That's why I think to eliminate this dubious aura, so to say, around these cases, it would be important to press the accusations to the Ukrainian court, to provide evidence, to proceed with the prosecution, and to have the final decision of the Ukrainian court. Because only after the final decision of the Ukrainian court, we can say that this institution is guilty. Otherwise, everyone is innocent on the basis of the presumption of innocence.
Right, that's for sure. So final question. In 2019, we saw the emergence of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, an independent church that was bestowed autocephaly from ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew. But the schism in Ukrainian Orthodoxy did not disappear since that time. What can we say about the interaction of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine and the Moscow-aligned Ukrainian Orthodox Church from that time? And do they have any desire for to get closer? Do you see any indications that they might want to unite?
Well, that's an
And if
excellent
not,
question.
why?
Thank you for that.
What's preventing them from?
That's a very good question. First of all, I believe that the schism does not exist in Ukraine anymore. It has been eliminated because everyone is now participating in, the church life, recognized by the global orthodoxy equally. There are no anymore, Orthodox of the second sort in Ukraine, as it used to be the case. However, the two structures, the Autocephalous Church and the Moscow Patriarchate, they still at odds with one another, and they don't seem to want to reconcile, really. That is my impression, and this goes in both ways. It applies to both structures. It seems that both churches act in the mode of competition instead of the mode of collaboration and dialogue, unfortunately. Well, of course, there are statements and claims that they want dialogue, but they don't seem to mean it, judging from what they do. Even the events around the Lavra, they happen in the mode of competition. I think sometimes in the mode of opportunism. There were times for opportunism for the Moscow Patriarchate in Ukraine, like, for example, in the time of Yanukovych, when the church used its political leverage, so to say, its support, in order to claim some extra turf for itself, extra territory for itself, at the expense of the Kyiv Pechersk. Now, the same opportune moment is for the Autocephalous Church, I believe, and unfortunately, they jumped on this opportunity, and they used this opportunity, and this opportunism, I think, is really damaging for any future rapprochement between the two churches. I think Ukraine nowadays really needs reconciliation among the churches. The strife between the churches really drives the confusion within the Ukrainian society, while it needs to be consolidated. And such steps as the episode or the episodes in Lavra, which have not been exhausted yet, we will probably see a continuation of that. They don't help the reconciliation of the Ukrainian society. I believe that in the scenario of the state policies, state steps by the state to deal with the church issue in Ukraine, the item called the Lavra would have to be somewhere in the end of the scenario, not in the beginning. It is something that one would have to conclude with eventually, a long journey of dealing with this issue, not to begin with. And I think this step seems to be, for me at least, a misstep. They had to wait, not to act immediately. And if acting, then the attitude which is pertinent to the state of war had to be applied. The attitude of dealing with individual cases and not dealing with the institutions, in bulk, in wholesale. As we are witnessing in the case of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is dealt as an institution in wholesale, and people are seen as judged by not what they do, but where they belong to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So just briefly, where do you see the situation going forward?
Well, difficult to predict, honestly, because now I think we have reached a point of unpredictability somehow, unfortunately. The confusion and destabilization that is emerging makes things difficult to predict, honestly. That's why I didn't want this to happen in the first place. I believe exactly that it is premature to deal with the issue of Lavra. Mm-hmm. we will see what will be the next step. Well, we will see first of all how big will be the new community under the autocephalous church. So far, it's only one person. We will see how many people will decide to join it. So it will indicate to us how sustainable, how real this community will be, and not just a virtual community as it is now. Then we will see what will be the follow-up in the terms of regarding other monasteries, primarily the Kyiv Lavra in the west of Ukraine, whether the same policies will be applied there, which is the hope at least of the autocephalous church. And we will see what will be the reactions of the people in Ukraine, and what will be the reactions of the international community. I don't see as bright as neither of them, honestly.